In the solitude of a snowy forest, a wolf was walking calmly. Suddenly it hears the cry of a child on the road. Guided by a protective instinct, it goes to the spot. In the end, a wolf and a child transform lives forever. The rain was mercilessly punishing the winding road that snaked through the dense Pine Valley forest. The car's headlights cut through the darkness like sharp knives, briefly illuminating the cascading raindrops. Inside the vehicle, the Johnson family traveled in silence, exhausted after a long day of celebrating little Theo's first birthday. Sarah, sitting in the passenger seat, anxiously looked at the dashboard clock. "Mike, I think we should have stayed at my parents' house. It's very late and this rain isn't letting up." Mike, with his hands firmly on the wheel, responded without taking his eyes off the road. "Don't worry, honey, we're almost there. Besides, Theo sleeps so well in the car." As if to confirm his father's words, a soft snoring came from the back seat, where the baby was sleeping peacefully in his car seat. Sarah smiled, turning to admire her son. His golden curls framed his angelic little face, and she felt a wave of love flood her chest. Suddenly, a shadow crossed the road. Mike instinctively hit the brakes, causing the car to skid on the wet pavement. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. The vehicle spun out of control, leaving the road and flipping over several times before coming to a stop, wheels up, on the edge of a ravine. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain and, moments later, by Theo's frightened cry. Sarah and Mike, unconscious, did not respond to their son's desperate pleas. Not far from there, Silver Fang, the imposing alpha wolf of the local pack, patrolled his territory. His golden eyes shone in the darkness, alert to any suspicious movement. The wind brought a strange smell to him, a mixture of metal, burned rubber, and human fear. Intrigued and cautious, Silver Fang advanced towards the odor. As he approached, Theo's cry grew louder, echoing through the forest. The wolf stopped at the edge of the road, observing the accident scene. His instinct told him to flee, to move away from humans. But something stronger compelled him to approach. With silent steps, Silver Fang circled the destroyed car. The smell of blood was strong, but the sound of the child's cry was what caught his attention most. Reaching the broken window, he saw Theo, still strapped in his car seat, with tears running down his red little face. At that moment, something changed inside the wolf. A protective, almost paternal instinct ignited in his chest. Carefully using his sharp teeth, Silver Fang began to work to free the baby from the car seat straps. Theo, seeing the large animal approach, stopped crying for a moment, his blue eyes wide with curiosity. When he finally managed to get the baby out of the car, Silver Fang held him gently by his clothes, as he would with one of his own cubs. The wolf hesitated for a moment, looking at Sarah and Mike. His instinct told him they needed help, but he also knew there was nothing he could do for them. With one last look at the destroyed car, Silver Fang turned and began to walk towards the forest, carrying Theo with him. The rain continued to fall, washing away the tracks left by the wolf and his precious cargo. As they entered the darkness of the woods, Silver Fang knew that his life, and that of his entire pack, was about to change forever. Theo, nestled against the wolf's soft fur, stopped crying. Perhaps it was the rhythmic movement of the walk, or the comforting warmth of the animal, but the baby soon fell asleep, feeling strangely safe in the unlikely arms of his new protector. The surrounding forest seemed to silently observe this unlikely pair, a fierce predator and his defenseless human charge. The trees whispered secrets to each other, while the moon, finally emerging from behind the rain clouds, cast a silvery glow on the wolf's fur and the baby's golden hair. Silver Fang advanced with determination, his instincts guiding him back to the heart of the forest, where his pack awaited. He knew he was about to challenge all the laws of nature, all the boundaries between humans and animals. But something inside him, an ancient and wise voice, told him that this was the right path. As they approached the pack's territory, the wolf began to howl. It was a long melodic sound, a call that echoed through the forest, announcing his arrival and preparing his companions for what was to come. In response, other howls rose in the night. The pack was answering, curious and apprehensive. What was their leader bringing with him? What new adventure awaited them? Meanwhile, on the road, the lights of a police car finally cut through the darkness, approaching the accident site. The fate of Sarah and Mike was still uncertain, as was Theo's future. But one thing was certain. On that rainy night, in the heart of Pine Valley Forest, an extraordinary story was just beginning. Silver Fang's howl echoed through the forest, announcing his return. The pack, gathered in the clearing that served as their home, waited anxiously. Luna, the alpha's mate, was the first to realize something was different. The scent the wind brought was unfamiliar, a mixture of milk, talcum powder, and something unmistakably human. When Silver Fang finally emerged from the shadows, gently carrying Theo between his teeth, a stunned silence fell over the group. The younger wolves instinctively backed away, while the older ones exchanged looks of confusion and concern. Luna approached cautiously, her amber eyes fixed on the small bundle her mate was carefully depositing on the ground. Theo, awakened by the movement, blinked sleepily at the circle of wolves surrounding him. "What have you done?" Luna asked in a low growl, her voice mixing disbelief and concern. Silver Fang raised his head, facing the gaze of each pack member. "I saved him," he answered simply. "He was alone, defenseless. I couldn't leave him behind." A murmur ran through the group. Shadow, an experienced and respected wolf, stepped forward. "But it's a human cub," he argued. "He doesn't belong to us. Humans will come looking for him, and if they come, we'll deal with it," Silver Fang replied firmly. "But for now, he needs us, our protection." As the wolves debated, Theo began to whimper, probably hungry and scared by the strange environment. It was at this moment that something unexpected happened. Aurora, a young she-wolf who had recently lost her own cubs, approached the baby. Gently, she began to lick Theo's face, cleaning him and calming him as she would with one of her pups. Aurora's gesture seemed to break the tension. One by one, the other wolves approached, curiously sniffing the small human. Theo, in turn, seemed strangely at ease, his little blue eyes observing the animals with more fascination than fear. "How are we going to feed him?" asked New Moon, one of the pack's youngest she-wolves. "He can't eat what we eat." Silver Fang looked at Luna, seeking support. She hesitated for a moment, but then nodded slightly. "There's a village not far from here," she said. "We can take what he needs from there." The suggestion was met with surprise. Wolves stealing food from humans to feed a human cub? It was an almost absurd idea. However, as they watched Theo, who was now smiling and trying to reach Aurora's muzzle with his chubby little hands, something changed in the heart of the pack. "We'll do whatever it takes," declared Silver Fang. "This cub is now part of our family." In the weeks that followed, Pine Valley Forest witnessed a surreal scene. Wolves took turns caring for Theo, keeping him warm on cold nights, watching over his sleep during the day. Aurora assumed the role of adoptive mother, rarely leaving the baby's side. Silver Fang and some other agile wolves made nightly incursions into the nearby village, returning with milk, fruits, and even diapers. The villagers were perplexed by the mysterious thefts, never suspecting the true reason behind them. Theo, for his part, seemed to flourish under the unusual care. His laughter echoed through the forest, blending with the wolves' howls in a way that seemed somehow absolutely natural. He crawled around the clearing, chasing butterflies and playing with the wolf cubs as if he were one of them. However, not everything was moments of joy. At night, when the forest grew quiet, Silver Fang often found himself thinking about Theo's family. He knew that somewhere, someone must be desperately searching for this little human. Guilt gnawed at him, but at the same time, the instinct to protect Theo was overwhelming. Luna noticed her mate's anguish. One night, as they watched Theo sleeping peacefully between Aurora's soft fur, she approached Silver Fang. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "That night, if you hadn't acted, he wouldn't have survived." Silver Fang nodded slowly. "But what if his true family is still out there? What if we're depriving him of his own kind?" Luna looked at the sleeping baby, and then back at her mate. "Maybe we are, but right now we're the family he needs, and who knows? Maybe he's the one who can build a bridge between our worlds." Luna's words echoed in Silver Fang's mind. A bridge between worlds. The idea was both frightening and exciting. What kind of future awaited this little human raised by wolves? And what impact would his presence have on the pack and the forest as a whole? As these questions hung in the air, life in the clearing continued. Theo learned to howl along with the wolves, his childish voice blending with the sounds of the forest. He watched attentively, as the wolves hunted and communicated, instinctively absorbing the lessons of wildlife. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, it became clear that Theo was no longer just a temporary visitor. He had become an integral part of the pack, loved and protected by each of its members. However, far away in the village and neighboring towns, posters with the face of a missing baby began to appear. The search for Theo was just beginning, and soon, the world of humans and the world of wolves would be on a collision course. For now, though, in the tranquility of the moonlit clearing, Theo slept serenely, protected by his unlikely guardians, completely oblivious to the whirlwind forming around him. Pine Valley Forest kept its secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal the extraordinary story of the Wolf Boy. The sun had barely risen on the horizon when the bell of St. Sebastian's church began to ring furiously, waking the inhabitants of the peaceful Pine Grove village. Father Anthony, breathless and wide-eyed, shouted for all to hear, "Come, everyone! It's a miracle, a divine sign!" Quickly, a crowd formed around the church. Among the curious were Mrs. Olivia, the local gossip always eager for news, Mr. Jack, the skeptical store owner, and even Dr. Peter, the village doctor, who rarely got involved in uproars. "What happened, Father?" asked Mrs. Olivia, adjusting the shawl over her shoulders. Father Anthony, still breathless, pointed to the church floor. There, to everyone's amazement, were wolf tracks mixed with hand and knee prints of a small child. "Impossible!" exclaimed Dr. Peter, adjusting his glasses to examine the marks more closely. "For it's true," insisted the priest. "And there's more. The altar, look at the altar." The crowd huddled at the church entrance, craning their necks to see. On the altar, there was a small pile of fresh fruits and a half-empty pot of milk. Next to it, a clean, folded diaper. "But what does this mean?" asked Mr. Jack, scratching his bald head. Father Anthony raised his hands to the heavens. "It's a sign, my brothers. The wolves, they're caring for a child." A buzz spread through the crowd. Some laughed, finding the idea absurd. Others whispered, remembering old stories about children raised by animals. It was then that Emily, a young teacher newly arrived in the village, stepped forward. "Wait a moment," she said, her calm voice cutting through the crowd's murmur. "Doesn't this remind all of you of little Theo's case, the baby who disappeared almost 2 years ago?" A heavy silence fell over the square. The case of Theo's disappearance had shaken not only Pine Grove Village, but the entire region. The initial search had been intense, but as time passed, many had lost hope. But this is madness!" exclaimed Mrs. Olivia. "Are you suggesting that the boy is alive and being raised by wolves?" "It wouldn't be the first time in history," commented Dr. Peter thoughtfully. "There are documented cases of children raised by wild animals." Father Anthony raised his hands, calling for silence. "My dear ones, whatever is happening, it's clear that we need to investigate. If there's a child out there, we need to find it and bring it back to civilization." The priest's words ignited a spark of hope and determination in the villagers' hearts. Soon, plans began to be made. Search teams would be organized, forest maps would be consulted, and even experienced hunters would be summoned. Meanwhile, at the local police station, Sergeant Wilson received an important call. It was from the state capital. "Sergeant," said the voice on the other end of the line, "we've received information about possible sightings of a child in the Pine Valley region. We believe it may be related to the case of little Theo Johnson's disappearance." Sergeant Wilson felt a shiver run down his spine. He remembered that case well. The rainy night, the accident on the road, the injured parents, and the baby who had simply disappeared without a trace. "Understood, sir," replied the sergeant. "I'll mobilize all our forces. We're going to find that child." As Pine Grove Village buzzed with the news and preparations for the search, deep in the forest, Silverfang's pack remained oblivious to the commotion. Theo, now almost 3 years old, ran and played among the wolves, his laughter echoing among the trees. Aurora, always vigilant, watched the boy with attentive and loving eyes. She had become a true mother to Theo, teaching him to survive in the forest, to understand the sounds and smells of nature. Silverfang, in turn, felt a growing restlessness. His sharp instincts alerted him to a change in the air. Something was about to happen. "Luna!" he called, turning to his mate. "We need to be prepared. I sense that humans are approaching." Luna nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "What will we do, Silverfang? We can't let them take Theo. He's one of us now." The great wolf looked at the boy, who at that moment was trying to climb on Shadow's back, the old wolf who had initially been skeptical about Theo's presence. Now Shadow laughed, or the lupine equivalent of it, as the boy clung to his fur. "No," replied Silver Fang, his voice firm. "We can't let him go, but we also can't deny his origin. We'll have to find a balance, a way to protect Theo, and at the same time allow him to know his own people." Silver Fang's decision was bold and unprecedented. Never before had a wolf pack tried to build a bridge between their world and that of humans. But then again, never before had a human boy become so intrinsically part of a pack. That night, as Theo slept nestled between Aurora and the other wolves, Silver Fang gathered the pack to discuss the future. Opinions were divided. Some, like Shadow, argued that they should take Theo deeper into the forest, out of human reach. Others, like Luna, believed it was time for Theo to know his origins. The discussion extended into the night, occasional howls echoing through the forest, as if nature itself was participating in the debate about the wolf boy's fate. Meanwhile, in the village, preparations for the great search were almost complete. Flashlights were checked, provisions were packed, and maps were meticulously studied. Sergeant Wilson, standing before the group of volunteers, made his final recommendations. "Remember," he said, his voice grave, "if you find the child, don't make sudden movements. He may be frightened and act unpredictably. Our priority is his safety." As the village prepared to enter the forest and the pack debated Theo's future, the boy himself slept peacefully, oblivious to the whirlwind forming around him. His world was about to change drastically, but for now, in his dreams, he ran free through the forest, howling along with his wolf brothers under the silvery moonlight. The following morning would bring challenges that no one, neither humans nor wolves, could predict. The meeting between two worlds was about to happen, and at the center of it all was a small boy, lost and found, human and wolf, an unlikely link between two species that had long distanced themselves from each other. Pine Valley Forest held its breath, waiting to see how this extraordinary story would unfold. Dawn brought with it a dense fog that enveloped Pine Valley Forest. The air was heavy with expectation, as if nature itself was holding its breath for the events that were about to unfold. In the pack's clearing, Theo awoke with the first rays of sunlight. Stretching like a wolf cub, he stood up and looked around, immediately noticing that something was different. The wolves were restless, moving from side to side, their ears perked up, alert to every sound. "What's happening?" Theo asked in a mixture of human language and lupine growls he had developed over the years. Silver Fur approached, his golden eyes fixed on the horizon. "Changes are coming, little one," the alpha wolf replied. "Today you will see others like you." Theo tilted his head, confused. "Others like me? But you are like me." Aurora, who was nearby, approached and affectionately licked the boy's face. "We are your family, Theo, but there are others out there who look more like you. They are coming." Theo's heart raced. Although he loved his lupine family, there had always been a latent curiosity about his origins. Sometimes in his dreams, he saw human faces he couldn't recognize, heard voices that seemed familiar but couldn't understand. Meanwhile, at the edge of the forest, the search team from Pine Village was preparing to enter the woods. Sergeant Oliveira, leading the group, gave the final instructions. "Remember, we're looking for a child who may be frightened and disoriented. Keep your eyes open for any sign. Footprints, torn clothes, anything out of the ordinary." Among the volunteers was Maria, the young teacher. She carried with her not only supplies but also a small teddy bear and some children's books. "If we find the boy," she thought, "we'll need something to calm him down and gain his trust." As the group advanced through the forest, the tension was palpable. Branches cracked under their feet, birds took flight startled, and occasionally, distant sounds that seemed like howls echoed among the trees. Back in the clearing, Silver Fur gathered the pack. "The time has come," he announced. "The humans are approaching. We can no longer delay the inevitable." Moon, always the voice of reason, asked, "What if they try to take Theo by force?" Silver Fur looked at the boy, who was now playing distractedly with some wolf cubs. "We won't allow it," he replied firmly. "But we also can't deny Theo the chance to know his origin. We'll watch and intervene only if necessary." With a soft howl, Silver Fur gave the signal. The pack began to move, guiding Theo towards the location where the humans were approaching. The boy, sensing the seriousness of the moment, followed in silence, his small hand gripping Aurora's fur. The encounter occurred in a small clearing bathed by the morning sunlight. The search group emerged from the trees, breathless and tired after hours of walking, and there on the other side was Theo, surrounded by his lupine protectors. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Humans and wolves stared at each other, no one daring to make a move. Theo, with wide eyes, observed those creatures so similar to him, yet so strange. It was Maria who broke the silence. Taking a step forward, she knelt down, placing herself at Theo's eye level. With a soft voice, she called out, "Hello, little one. Don't be afraid. We've come to help you." Theo tilted his head, curious. The words were familiar, distant echoes of a life he barely remembered. Hesitantly, he took a step forward, but Aurora gently held him back with her teeth, pulling him back. Sergeant Oliveira, seeing the scene, whispered to his men, "Nobody move, let the teacher handle this." Maria, noticing the fear in the boy's eyes, had an idea. Slowly, she took the teddy bear from her backpack and placed it on the ground, gently pushing it towards Theo. The soft toy caught the boy's attention. Cautiously, he approached, always under the watchful eye of the wolves. When he finally reached the bear, Theo picked it up, examining it curiously. A shy smile formed on his lips. Encouraged, Maria continued, "See, we don't want to hurt you. We just want to help. There are people who miss you, who love you very much." Theo looked at Silverfur as if seeking permission. The alpha wolf took a step forward, placing himself beside the boy. To everyone's surprise, he sat down, indicating there was no immediate threat. Slowly, the tension began to dissipate. Theo, still holding the bear, took a few more steps towards Maria. The young teacher extended her hand, and after a moment of hesitation, the boy touched it. It was a moment of deep connection. Human and nature, civilization and wilderness, meeting at a delicate point of balance. Silent tears ran down Maria's face, while Theo looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and recognition. Sergeant Oliveira, seeing that the situation was under control, slowly approached. "We need to take him back," he said quietly. "His parents, they survived the accident. They've been waiting for him for so long." Upon hearing the mention of his parents, something awakened in Theo's memory. Fleeting images of smiling faces, the sound of a lullaby, the scent of a loving embrace. He looked at Aurora and Silverfur, his protectors, his family in the forest, and then back to Maria and the other humans. Silverfur, understanding that this was a crucial moment, approached Theo. With a gentle touch of his muzzle, he nudged the boy gently towards the humans. It was a gesture of farewell, but also of blessing. Theo, with tears in his eyes, hugged Silverfur's neck and then Aurora's. "I will return," he promised in his mixed language. "You will always be my family." With hesitant steps, Theo walked towards Maria, who welcomed him with a warm embrace. The search group watched in silence, marveling at the scene unfolding before them. As the sun rose in the sky, illuminating the clearing, humans and wolves remained there, witnesses to a unique moment in history. Two worlds that had long been separated, now united again by the love of a boy and the compassion of a wolf pack. The return to the village would be just the beginning of a new journey. There was much to be learned, many bridges to be built, but at that moment in Pine Valley Forest, a new era of understanding and mutual respect had been born. The journey back to Pine Village was a journey of discovery for Theo. Each step took him away from the life he knew and brought him closer to a world that, although his by-birth seemed completely strange to him. Maria walked by his side, gently holding his hand while the rest of the search group surrounded them in a protective circle. Theo looked at everything with wide eyes of curiosity. The colorful clothes of the humans, so different from the fur of the wolves. The objects they carried, backpacks, flashlights, maps, were completely new to him. Occasionally he would stop, point to something and emit a mixture of human and lupine sounds, trying to ask about what he saw. Maria, with infinite patience, explained everything. "This is a compass, Theo. It helps us find our way in the forest." Or, "That noise? It's a cell phone. People use it to communicate over long distances." Sergeant Oliveira, observing the interaction, couldn't help but marvel. "It's amazing how he survived all these years," he commented to one of the volunteers. "It's going to be quite a challenge to reintegrate him into society." As they approached the edge of the forest, Theo began to get more agitated. The sounds and smells of civilization, distant cars, chimney smoke frightened him. He stopped, refusing to take another step, his eyes searching for the way back to the safety of the forest. Maria, sensing his fear, knelt before him. "It's okay, Theo," she said softly. "I know it's scary, but I promise I'll be with you the whole time. And remember, your family is waiting for you." The mention of family made Theo hesitate. Vague memories of smiling faces and loving voices floated in his mind. Slowly, he nodded and started walking again, clinging to the teddy bear as if it were a talisman. When they finally emerged from the forest, a crowd was waiting for them. Villagers, journalists from neighboring towns, all eager to see the wolf boy with their own eyes. Camera flashes went off, voices rose in a chorus of exclamations and questions. Theo, frightened by the commotion, hid behind Maria, trembling. Sergeant Oliveira, seeing the boys panic, quickly took control of the situation. "Step back, all of you," he ordered firmly. "Give the boy some space. He needs calm and quiet now." The crowd reluctantly retreated, making way for the group to pass. Maria, still holding Theo's hand, gently guided him towards an ambulance waiting nearby. "We're going to do a quick checkup on you, okay?" she explained. "The doctors just want to make sure you're healthy." Inside the ambulance, Dr. Peter was waiting. With slow movements and explaining each action, he began to examine Theo. To everyone's surprise, the boy was in excellent health. His body was lean but muscular, evidence of an active life in the forest. His senses, especially hearing and smell, seemed extraordinarily sharp. "It's fascinating," Dr. Peter murmured, taking notes. "He adapted perfectly to wildlife. It's going to be an incredible case study for science." Maria frowned upon hearing this. "He's not an experiment, doctor. He's a boy who needs love and care." As the examination proceeded, a commotion outside caught everyone's attention. A car had arrived, and out of it came a man and a woman, both with expressions of anxiety and hope on their faces. Sergeant Oliveira recognized them immediately. "They're Theo's parents," he announced, "Marina and Carlos Silva." Maria felt her heart race. This would be the moment of truth, the reunion everyone had been waiting for so long. Carefully, she turned to Theo. "There are some very special people here to see you," she said softly. "Do you want to meet them?" Theo, still clutching his teddy bear, nodded shyly. Maria helped him down from the ambulance, and together they walked towards the anxiously waiting couple. Marina was the first to move. With tears in her eyes, she knelt down, coming to Theo's eye level. "My son," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "My little miracle." Theo looked at her, his blue eyes wide. Something in that voice, in that scent, awakened deeply buried memories. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he reached out and touched Marina's face. "Mommy." The word came out as a whisper, half human, half growl. It was as if a dam had burst. Marina pulled Theo into an embrace, sobbing with joy. Carlos joined them, enveloping his reunited family in his strong arms. The scene moved everyone present. Maria wiped away a tear, feeling a mixture of joy for the reunion and a pang of sadness, knowing that her role in Theo's life was coming to an end. But then, to her surprise, Theo turned towards her, extending his hand. He wanted her to join the family embrace. With an emotional smile, Maria approached, being welcomed by Marina and Carlos. "Thank you," Marina whispered. "Thank you for bringing our son back." As the family reconnected, Sergeant Oliveira approached Dr. Peter. "And now," he asked, "how are we going to help this boy readapt?" The doctor shook his head thoughtfully. "It's going to be a long and delicate process. He'll need therapy, special education, lots of love and patience. But looking at this scene," he gestured towards the embracing family, "I have hope that everything will work out." As the sun began to set, casting golden hues over Pine Village, a new phase began in Theo's life. The wolf boy had returned to civilization, but the lessons and love he had received in the forest would remain forever in his heart. That night, as Theo fell asleep in a bed for the first time in years, cradled by the love of his parents and still clutching the teddy bear, a distant howl echoed from the forest. It was Silver Fir, saying goodbye and good luck to his human cub. Theo's journey was far from over. There would be challenges, adjustments, and discoveries ahead. But with the love of two families, one human and one lupine, guiding his path, The future seemed bright and full of possibilities. The months following Theo's return were an emotional roller coaster and a challenge for everyone involved. Pine Village, once a quiet place forgotten on the map, became the center of attention for the media and scientific community. Journalists, psychologists, and anthropologists from all over the country converged on the small town, eager to meet and study the fascinating case of the Wolf Boy. Marina and Carlos Silva, determined to protect their newly recovered son, decided to move to a house on the outskirts of the village close to the forest. It was an attempt to create an environment that was both safe and familiar for Theo. "We want him to have the best of both worlds," Marina explained to Maria, who had become a constant and comforting presence in the family's life. "Howie can't deny his roots in the forest, but we also need to help him adapt to life among humans." The Silva house soon became a curious hybrid of human home and natural habitat. The backyard was transformed into a mini-forest, with trees, shrubs, and even a small artificial cave where Theo could take refuge when he felt overwhelmed. Inside the house, modern objects coexisted with natural elements, creating a unique and welcoming environment. Theo, for his part, faced the daily challenge of navigating between two worlds. His first weeks were marked by moments of confusion and frustration. He found cooked food strange, preferred to sleep on the floor instead of the soft bed, and was often found sniffing the air or howling at the full moon. Maria, who had offered to be Theo's private tutor, faced the challenge of teaching him not only to read and write, but also the basic customs and behaviors of human society. "Theo, remember, we use utensils to eat, not our hands," she patiently explained during one of the meals. The boy looked at the fork in his hand, then at the plate of food, and finally at Maria. With a mischievous smile, he dropped the utensil and plunged his hands into the food, laughing at his tutor's surprised expression. Carlos, observing the scene, couldn't contain a laugh. "Well, at least he's having fun," he commented, helping to clean up the mess. Despite the challenges, Theo made remarkable progress. His learning ability was extraordinary, as if his brain was hungry for knowledge. In a few months, he could already communicate in simple sentences, read basic words, and showed an insatiable curiosity about the world around him. However, there were moments when the longing for his life in the forest consumed him. On particularly difficult nights, Theo would escape to the backyard, where he spent hours looking at the distant forest, howling softly. It was on one of these nights that Marina had an idea. "What if we organized regular visits to the forest?" she suggested to Carlos. "Maybe that will help Theo maintain a connection to his past, without feeling completely uprooted from it." The suggestion was met with enthusiasm not only by Theo, but also by local authorities. Sergeant Oliveira saw this as an opportunity to better study and protect the local fauna, especially silver fur's pack. So once a week, Theo, accompanied by his parents Maria and a small team of biologists, would enter Pine Valley Forest. These expeditions soon became the highlight of the week for the boy. During one of these visits, something extraordinary happened. As the group walked along a familiar trail, Theo suddenly stopped, his body tense and alert. Before anyone could react, he let out a long, melodious howl. For a moment, silence reigned in the forest. Then, in response, a chorus of howls echoed in the distance. Theo's face lit up with a radiant smile. "Family," he said simply, pointing in the direction of the sounds. To everyone's amazement, familiar figures emerged from the vegetation. Silver Fur, Moon Aurora, and other members of the pack. They maintained a respectful distance from the human group, but their eyes were fixed on Theo. The boy looked at his parents, a silent question in his eyes. Marina, with tears in her eyes, nodded. "Go," she whispered, "but come back to us." With a cry of joy, Theo ran towards the wolves. What followed was a scene that left everyone present emotional. Theo playing, rolling, and talking with the wolves as if he had never left. Maria, observing the scene, felt a lump in her throat. "It's incredible," she murmured. "It's as if he's the living bridge between our worlds." Carlos hugged Marina, both watching their son interact with his other family. "Maybe that's exactly what he is," he replied, "an ambassador between humans and nature." That encounter marked a turning point in Theo's adaptation. From that day on, he seemed to find a balance between his two worlds. At school, which he started attending part-time, he fascinated his classmates with his stories about life in the forest. At home, He alternated between playing video games and spending hours watching birds in the backyard. As the months turned into years, Theo grew into an extraordinary young man. His love for nature led him to become a passionate environmental advocate. His unique abilities, keen senses, deep understanding of animal behavior, made him a valuable ally in conservation projects. The story of the Wolf Boy of Pine Valley inspired people around the world. Books were written, documentaries were produced, and the small village became a model of harmonious coexistence between humans and nature. But for Theo, the true magic was in the simple moments. In the nights when he sat in the backyard with his parents, looking at the stars and listening to the distant sounds of the forest. In the weekly visits to his lupine family. In the long conversations with Maria about the mysteries of the human and natural world. In his heart, Theo knew he was more than just a boy, more than just a wolf. He was living proof that love, compassion, and understanding could transcend the barriers between species, between worlds. And as he walked through life with one foot in each world, he carried with him the hope of a future where humans and nature could coexist in harmony. The full moon shone over Pine Valley, and at the edge of the forest a solitary howl echoed, not of sadness or loneliness, but of joy and belonging. Theo, the wolf boy, was home, in both of his homes. 15 years had passed since the day Theo returned to civilization. Pine Village, once a forgotten spot on the map, had transformed into a model of environmental conservation and harmonious coexistence between humans and nature. And at the center of this transformation was Theo, now an 18-year-old young man whose story continued to inspire people around the world. On that sunny summer morning, Theo walked through the forest that had once been his home. His steps were silent, a habit he never lost from his years with the wolves. By his side, Maria accompanied him, no longer as his tutor, but as a dear friend and confidant. "It's hard to believe it's been 15 years, Maria commented, observing the tall, athletic young man Theo had become. His blue eyes, once wide with astonishment at the human world, now shone with wisdom and purpose. Theo smiled, a gesture that still carried a touch of wildness. "Sometimes it feels like it was yesterday that you found me here, scared and confused. Other times, I feel like I've lived 1,000 lives since then." They reached a familiar clearing, the place where, years ago, Theo had reunited with his pack for the first time after his return. There, a small ceremony was being prepared. Colorful banners with environmental conservation messages decorated the trees, and a small improvised stage had been set up. Marina and Carlos, Theo's parents, were already there, helping with the final preparations. Seeing her son, Marina couldn't contain tears of pride. "My boy," she whispered, hugging him. "Are you ready for today?" Theo nodded, his expression a mixture of determination and emotion. Today was the day he would officially launch the Pine Valley Foundation, an organization dedicated to protecting the forest and promoting peaceful coexistence between humans and wildlife. As people began to arrive for the event, villagers, journalists, environmentalists, and curious onlookers from all over the country, Theo stepped away for a moment. Walking to the edge of the clearing, he let out a long, melodic howl. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then, in response, a series of howls echoed through the forest. From among the trees emerged a majestic figure, silver fur, now an old wolf but still imposing. By his side was Moon, and behind them, several younger members of the pack. A murmur of amazement ran through the crowd. Even after all these years, the sight of the wolves was still extraordinary. Theo knelt, allowing Silver Fur to approach. The old wolf touched his muzzle to the young man's face, a gesture of recognition and affection. "Welcome, my family," said Theo, his voice carrying a mixture of human language and lupine sounds that only he mastered. With the wolves watching from a distance, the ceremony began. Sergeant Oliveira, now the mayor of Pine Village, was the first to speak. 15 years ago, we thought we were rescuing a lost boy. Little did we know that, in fact, we were being gifted with a teacher, a guide who would show us how to live in harmony with nature. Next, it was Maria's turn. Theo taught me more than I could ever teach him. He showed us that compassion and understanding can transcend the barriers between species. When it finally came time for Theo to speak, a respectful silence fell over the clearing. Even the birds seemed to have paused their song to listen. "I was born human, but I was raised by wolves," Theo began, his voice clear and confident. "For a long time I felt like I didn't fully belong to either world. But over time I realized that my true mission was to be a bridge between them." He paused, looking at his human parents and then at Silver Fir and Moon. "The Pine Valley Foundation is not just about protecting this forest or these wolves. It's about redefining our relationship with the natural world. It's about remembering that we are part of nature, not separate from it." As Theo spoke, sharing his vision of a future where humans and animals coexisted in harmony, where forests were valued as much as cities, something extraordinary began to happen. Attracted by his voice and presence, forest animals began to approach the clearing. Deer watched curiously from the edge of the forest, birds perched on nearby branches, and even a black bear lurked in the distance. The scene was surreal and magical, as if the entire forest was gathering to witness this historic moment. "This is just the beginning," Theo concluded, his voice charged with emotion and determination. "With the Pine Valley Foundation, we will expand this model of coexistence to other regions. We will educate, inspire, and transform. Because when we protect nature, we're not just saving animals or trees, we're saving ourselves." When Theo finished his speech, there wasn't just applause, there were howls, roars, and bird songs, as if the entire forest was celebrating together. That night, after the ceremony, Theo found himself once again at the edge of the forest. Silver Fir was by his side, the two of them watching the full moon rising in the sky. "You did well, cub," said the old wolf in his language. "You honored both of your families." Theo smiled, placing a hand on his mentor's Silver Fir. "And I will continue to honor them," he replied. "Every day of my life will be dedicated to protecting this place and all who call it home." As man and wolf stood side by side, their howls rose in unison, echoing through the night. It was a song of hope, of unity, of a future where the boundaries between the human world and the wild world dissolved, giving way to a new harmony. The story of the Wolf Boy of Pine Valley was no longer just about a lost and found boy. It was a tale of two worlds coming together, of barriers being broken down, of love transcending species. It was a story that would continue to be told for generations, inspiring others to look beyond differences and find the deep connection that unites all living beings. And so, under the glow of the full moon, with the whisper of the trees and the distant howl of wolves as background music, Theo's legacy, the boy who belonged to two worlds and united them with his heart, continued to grow, promising a brighter and more harmonious future for all.